meeting of the Transport, Regeneration and Climate Policy Committee. I'm Councillor Julie Groclett and I will be chairing the meeting this afternoon. I would like to thank everyone for attending this afternoon, especially our member of the public who's got a question for us, Mr Chapman. Thank you for coming along. And because we're all now sat in a nice little squarish circle, I will ask officers and members to just go around in turn and introduce themselves, please, starting with Robert.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Robert Parkin. I'm a Deputy Monitoring Officer and Legal Advisor to the committee today.
Thanks, Chair. Will Stewart, Director of Investment, Climate Change and Planning.
Christine Gilligan, Councillor for Hillsborough Ward and Deputy Chair of this committee.
Ruth Mercereau, Councillor for City Ward and member of this committee.
Hello, my name's Diane Hurst. I'm an elected member for Richmond Ward.
Hi, Minesh Parekh, Councillor for Crooks and Crosspool and substitute member in today.
Councillor Richard Shaw, Councillor for Beautiful Green Ward.
Councillor Ian Auckland, Councillor for Graves Park Ward.
Andrew Sanger, Councillor for Forward Ward and Group Spokesperson.
Sarah Hyde, Democratic Services.
Thank you, everyone. The meeting today is open for members of the public and is being webcast. We haven't received any petitions today and we have one question from a member of the public. The agenda and reports for today's meeting are available on the Council's website and a small number of copies are available here in the Council chamber. Can I please request that mobile telephones and other gizmos are turned to silent or switched off so as not to disturb the conduct of the meeting, please? And can we all note that there is no planned test for the fire alarm today? If there is an evacuation, please can we take instruction from the Town Hall staff? And our assembly point is Tudor Square. Just a couple of things to pick up that I would like to mention. I think members, you all deserve a pat on the back, and also officers for the local plan yesterday. We finally got to the point where we've got something that is out for consultation, so I think it's been really difficult at times, but really good piece of work. So thank you for everyone who's been involved in that, especially officers for their patience in keeping going with us all in terms of making sure that we do that. We also had notification earlier this week in relation to our Mode Shift Stars programme that we do for road safety in schools and with young people, and we are top of the class in relation to a number of councillors with that. So again, that's a really good piece of work, and it really is important that we're making sure that, you know, children and young people understand road safety, and so well done to everyone who's involved in that. That is really great. And then hopefully you have all seen the email that we received this morning. We had questions at the last month's meeting in relation to swifts in the area, and we've had a really nice email from the petitioner back about that, which I think was fascinating. So again, something else to celebrate. So I think some good news for us all to take forward and look forward to as we go to the end of the year. Item 2 is apologies for absence, please.
Yes, Chair, I've had apologies from Councillor Mazza Iqbal and Councillor Craig Gamble-Pugh.
Thank you, Sarah. Exclusions of public and press, item 3. Can we please note that item 8 on the agenda includes exempt appendices that are not available to the public and the press because they contain exempt information. If members of the committee wish to discuss the information in these restricted appendices, members of the public and press will be kindly asked to leave the meeting at that point, and we will also have to suspend the webcast at that point. Item 4 is declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest, please? Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. On the 20-mile-an-hour scheme for Batemore, that's what's part of the ward I represent, and also I live within the boundary of the proposed scheme.
Councillor Auckland.
And similar, the non-lease scheme is in the ward I represent. but it's a personal interest, I feel.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Item 10, the appendix on page 93 clearly covers a lot of schemes that affect my ward, but also some of them are citywide. So I assume we're all, in effect, we're all equally involved in that one. But I'm declaring it because there's probably more forward items than any other ward. So I thought I'd better just declare that as a person, just as a ward councillor.
Councillor Messeray.
Yeah, on the same point, Highfield is in my ward, so I'm declaring an interest there, although I don't live in Highfield.
I'm feeling quite left out. Okay, I think we've got all of those. So, minutes of the previous meeting, they're in the agenda pack at page 11. Can we approve the minutes of the extraordinary meeting held on the 3rd of November, please, and the minutes of the last meeting held on the 24th of November as a true record? But can we note that we need to change the minutes to the presenting petitioner with regard to the swift breaks, and note that Fiona was the speaker and not Nicola. So with that amendment, are we happy to agree, please, members? Thank you. Item 7 is the work programme. Sarah. Sorry. Oh, that's terrible. Mr Chapman, I do apologise. I'm that busy trying to skip through this so everyone can get to the next meetings. I forgot the really important part. Would you like to take the seat there in front of you and read your question to members? I really am sorry about that.
There we go. Does the committee agree the delivery of Connecting Sheffield schemes should be sped up to help people travel cheaply by walking, cycling and by public transport in cost of the living crisis? Or should the council continue to squander the 50 million funding that's already won from the government? Okay.
Thank you for the question. Can I say in reply, the council, and I'm sure I speak for this committee, remain committed to the programme as outlined in the Connecting Sheffield proposals. This includes the Transforming Cities Fund application, the Active Travel Fund, the day-to-day local transport funding, but most recently the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement. What I would like to highlight is that delivering the schemes of this scale during a period of significant change has not been easy. There have been wider forces at play within the construction industry, which has ultimately slowed down delivery, but we are working through the aftermath of these seismic deviations as best we can. Providing access to and enabling active travel and public transport use is at the cornerstone of our transport policy. This needs sustainable and inclusive travel options, both for access to core social amenities, but also to get people to work, education, and effectively to plan for the future. We are working with our funders, to which we are not alone, to identify options for acceleration, whilst also critiquing in great detail our own practices to ensure that further delay is minimised. So I think it's an important question. It is something that has taxed all of us in relation to making sure that we do get the programmes out as quickly as we can, but hopefully that explanation helps you understand why we're in the position that we're in. And thank you for coming, and please accept my apologies again for rushing through you. Thank you, Mr Chapman. Councillor Messeray.
Just in case it's useful or interesting, I'm aware that at Cycle Forum we're going to get updates from the cycling officer, Paul Sullivan, tonight. I'm aware that at Cycle Forum, in case it's useful, and if you remember, tonight at 5 o'clock we're due to get more updates from the cycling officer, Paul Sullivan, about the various schemes, in case that's useful to know.
Thank you for that. Item 7 properly now.
Thanks, Chair. Okay, so as usual, this is the committee's work programme. It's attached as appendix to the report and it's for consideration and discussion. It aims to show all the known substantive agenda items for forthcoming meetings of the committee, and it enables this committee and other committees, officers, partners and the public to plan their work with and for this committee. So the work programme is a live document and is brought to every meeting. The recommendations are outlined on page 36. The new items and referrals are on page 39. Just to note, we have scheduled an extraordinary meeting of this committee in January. That will look at the Traffic Management Act Part 6. We've put that in because that needs to be considered before the next ordinary meeting in February. Lastly, on page 40, there's also some lead officer commentary on a referral that came through on the speed limit on Rails Road and Bingley Lane, and that's for members' approval. And that's it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Any questions or comments, members, please? Councillor Sanger.
Thank you, Chair. And, it's going to be the same question and we're going to keep at it. And I fully accept that we need that special meeting. And we've got a meeting in January and a meeting in February and a meeting in March. We clearly don't really want a meeting in April for other reasons. So we have 3 pages of items that are currently not assigned with dates. Realistically, are they going to happen in this council year or not? I mean, how many more times are they going to be brought back? And we're going to say these, because if you look at them, they are really important items, and they're there, or they've been put there because officers and members think they're really important. I'm just very concerned we're not going to get those onto an agenda this side of the end of the council year.
Are you proposing another meeting?
I'm not against another meeting as long as it's before the 16th of March. If we have to have an extra meeting in February, we have to have an extra meeting in February. What I don't want is 10 items that we and officers have jointly decided are important enough to be on this work programme and that we haven't been able to bring to committee. I think that would be worse than having an extra meeting. If we need to have an extra meeting, we should have an extra meeting.
In all seriousness, I think it's a reasonable and fair point. And we do have another work programme meeting in January, so I don't know if that's perhaps the best place to address that and see how we do it. But Will?
Thanks, Chair. I was going to make the same point that we do have a work plan meeting scheduled in February, and I think we could take a decent chunk of that meeting to look at prioritisation. If there are things that we want to get in before we enter pre-election period, then that should be the meeting where we collectively and you as members decide on the priorities. So I'm thankful we've got that session in January to talk through these issues.
Councillor Mercer?
I'm just looking at page 55 and I notice that the mitigate overspends and income generation item hasn't got anything assigned to it in terms of officer, a decision, a date, even a to be confirmed. It's the last item on page 55.
Anyone got any comments, officer-wise?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think probably the reason this hasn't got any detailed commentary is that this relates to our budget setting activity, which members have been discussing, and indeed we as a committee have decided on our annual budget saving measures. But I think we can take this further and discuss this at the next session, because some of the budget mitigation measures are being worked through at the moment, and we hope to implement them in this financial year, but the bulk of them will happen in the next financial year.
I'm also thinking about schemes to generate income as well as part of the discussion. So would there be opportunity to do that too?
I think there's an opportunity through the work plan session that we've got in January to bring other items, and in fact in the last work plan session that we had a couple of months ago now, Sarah, we did go through what the kind of appropriate mechanisms were for members to raise things and get them on the work plan. So there is further clarity on that, and there will be a chance to introduce new ideas at that session. Although, taking Councillor Sanger's point, we do have a huge list of things that we need to prioritise. So, but the opportunity is there, I guess, is my message.
Thank you.
Would it be worth then, if members do have anything else that they feel should be on the work programme, if they could get those into officers before the January meeting, just so that we've got absolutely everything that we think we need to consider? Would that be helpful? Should they send those back through to Sarah? Yeah, is that okay? And then Sarah can add them to the list, and we can make sure then that they're considered in the round in January. So a bit of homework, everyone. There you go. Any more? Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a suggestion for the work programme. I mean, it does have a column that says like final decision and date and things, but I know several items on the work plan are subject to like external deadlines from, you know, whether it's government or other departments and so on. And I wonder if having a column to put in those external deadlines would be useful for prioritising the items.
Good suggestion. I'm sure we can make sure that happens. Thank you. Does anyone have any more comments or questions? If not, we have the full recommendations on page 36. Are we all happy to agree those, please? Anybody not? Lovely. Thank you. Item 8 is the Levelling Up Fund update on Castlegate. We've got Tammy and Alan. Good afternoon. Thank you both for coming. If you'd like to introduce yourselves and give us your report when you're ready, please.
Hello, I'm Tammy Whittaker, Head of Regeneration and Property Services.
And I'm Alan Season, I'm the Service Manager for City Regeneration and Major Projects.
Okay, so we're bringing back a report on Castlegate. At the last committee meeting there was an update on the progress of the Levelling Up Fund, and a couple of recommendations were deferred. So this report is bringing back those recommendations to committee following further conversations with members. The report covers background to the Levelling Up Fund and the projects included. The three projects are the Castle site, which has been awarded £15.7 million, S1 Art Space, £2.6 million, and Harmony Networks, £1.6 million of Levelling Up Fund. And the projects are there to deliver a range of outputs on behalf of the Department for Levelling Up Homes and Communities. At the last meeting, we brought an overview of the concept plan for the Castle site, and the two proposals which were deferred. One was to include two development plots, the Mudford Tavern, the Market Tavern and the Mudford buildings as the first two development plots of the 6 development plots proposed to be developed on the site, and also to approach the Department for Levelling Up Homes and Communities to relocate an element of the project into the Castlegate area. There is information in the closed appendix, so if members have questions about that, we'll need to take those out of the public debate.
Thank you. Bearing in mind Tammy's last comment about the 2 closed appendices, do we have any questions on the main body of the report, please, members? Councillor Auckland.
Thank you, Chair. So we had as members, some of us had a good walk round the entire heart of the city development and round the Castlegate site. And from this, I was clear, I think, that there are 3 strands in this. There's the opening up the castle, there's the two buildings, the Market Tavern and the Mumford building, that now need to be included within the envelope for 6 development plots. And that only the money from the development element only will be used if permission is got from the department to deal with the 2 buildings. That the regenerating the bit about opening up the coverts and the public realm, a lot of things that members have been involved in for a long time. We want to see that happen for sure. Regarding the S1 Arts project, having looked at it again and read through the papers for today, I do think actually that the approach to try and save that project is a perfectly reasonable suggestion to follow, though I do feel very strongly that the existing community use of the Mudford building, basically people need to be squared off on that, and there's a lot of work to be done to satisfy people that their position in those buildings is secure. I don't know whether, Dan, you want to interject and correct some of my line of reasoning so far, in which case you're welcome. No, okay, all right. So I'm now convinced that recommendation A is a goer, and the recommendation about the confidential section is just a sensible way to deal with the money side of things. The only thing, and I hope that this will be noted, and possibly if somebody wants to conceive of an amendment, I'd be happy to support it, is in recommendation, is basically only the development plots only will be used as it were the give way, if something has to give way, as the other two buildings are brought back into use. That when you seek further permission from the department to modify the scheme, that if those two buildings are taken within the line, nothing will happen. You won't have second thoughts, you won't ask for any refinement of the funding, will not be asked to look at it again. Basically, it'll be no give whatsoever, howsoever, in any way whatsoever, in terms of delivering the other bit of the projects. And they basically opening up the castle and the public realm and the infrastructure, and that nothing will interfere with that. If anything has to give, it's some of the 6 development plots, or 8 development plots, if that becomes the case with the 2 buildings coming. Either way, that's it. No more. End of. Nothing else will happen. That's it, Chair. Is that the case? Because it's members' questions.
Yeah, so as it's clearly stated in the report, the funding for the repair of those 2 buildings comes from the development plot allocation. Our requirement under Department of Levelling Up requirements is to develop a number of development plots. All we're suggesting is that those 2 are the first 2 that we bring forward. The funding for the castle site is still there, it's protected, we're still planning on using that exactly as is. And I think I explained this last time, but this Levelling Up programme is slightly different to other regeneration programmes in that there are 3 projects to deliver. Under other regeneration programmes, you can ask to via money between the projects. In this scenario, we can't. So the money for those projects is fixed.
Can't, won't, must not. That's it.
Are you reassured?
As long as my words are ordinarily understood as they are meant, and we get agreement around the table.
Thank you. Councillor Hurst.
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank officers, first of all, for giving up their time to do the walkabout with us. It proved extremely useful in being able to walk the site rather than seeing it on plan, and be able to have pointed out to us which aspect of the area had monies attributed to it from which pot and how they were going to be used. I think it was also a useful conversation to be able to look at the buildings that were requested to be included within the sites, and to be able to see that there were valid reasons for that. On the basis of that, and also the conversations that were had about including revisiting the Castlegate working group and revisiting the membership list, and including people there who were community partners who hadn't necessarily wanted to be involved or thought it necessary to be involved up to a certain point. I feel that the work that's been done to revitalise that and include all those that need to be included reassures me that going forwards we have a viable project. So thank you to officers, and I think it was a useful process, and on the basis of the information contained within the report and the site visit, I feel that I'm able to support the proposal going forwards.
Thank you, Councillor Hurst. Councillor Sanger.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And, sorry, I thought we were still very much at the questions stage. I mean, I think we have to thank officers for bringing the report back, and I think so we've not lost too much time. I think this is a clearer report outlining some of the issues. I still think that we're some way to go in terms of understanding our relationship with partners, which some of which the relationship is of many years standing, and some of which is not just as community partners but as tenants of buildings we own. But just in terms of that latter point, because clearly the last meeting we spent a lot of time in terms of the existing tenants. So in terms of what additional reassurance can we have in terms of how the process will work of the current users of the Mudfield buildings? What will be the process of engagement with them over the coming months, assuming this goes through and we develop this site over the next 2 or 3 years?
So we met the tenants prior to the previous committee meeting. We've got another meeting with them next week. Tuesday, yeah. And we'll be talking to them exactly about what needs to happen, because the building does need repair, and that's threatening their activity in there. So it'll be a process of ongoing dialogue about understanding how we can work with them, how if we need to take them out of that building in order to repair it, how that will work, what the alternative space will be, and what their kind of ongoing future arrangements will be. So it's an ongoing process of dialogue as we get to know more detail.
Chair, and I think we accept that. I think we accepted that at the last meeting. I think we all know that in any development scheme, you're going to have to work with the people directly affected, and some of that is going to be detailed work that quite rightly doesn't need to come back to committee. It's just as members we need to see that that's proceeding in a measured way, in a fair and accountable way. I think the bigger challenge for me was the other set of questions in terms of our long-term partners, in terms of the Sheaf and Porter River Trust, and in terms of Friends of Sheffield Castle, because we have been working with those two organisations for more than a decade, and to find one of those organisations not happy with your previous report and having very challenging questions, as somebody who wasn't up to speed on the project, I found that quite challenging. Clearly, I welcome the work that officers have done to bring myself and the other 83 members of council up to speed, because I don't think it was just myself who'd slipped behind in terms of the level briefing that we required to understand this. But I'm grateful that we passed the amendment last time, so that we've now got the members working group. But what assurance can I have that the partnership work with, particularly with those two groups, is on a sound footing? Because I notice it in the report in terms of the consultation. That there was the public consultation, but the fact that one of these partner groups came to the last meeting and said they were very concerned that the opening up of the Sheaf may not happen because of the need to prioritise other funds, that to me was a warning sign. So what sort of comfort can you give me that we've got a good relationship with those two organisations, and the partnership group understands that the various steps of this development?
So there are a number of engagement routes in place. There is the Castlegate Partnership, of which those two organisations are members, and that meets regularly. There are also a series of technical groups, of which the Sheaf and Porter Rivers Trust and the Friends of Castleside sit on, and they meet even more regularly. We also met with the Sheaf and Porters Rivers Trust last week, and so that dialogue is ongoing, and actually those two organisations have a lot of information shared with them on a very regular basis.
Thanks, Jan. So on that basis, as I say, I feel as Councillor Hawkins has said, we're able to move forward on this. But as I say, it's with those reassurances, and we need to continue working with the partners involved, as well as I previously said, with the tenants of the current tenants of the building, who clearly are going to be affected by the scheme. But at the end of the day, this is about the Castle site, which is the whole reason Sheffield is here. So it's really important in terms of our history. It's a real opportunity to improve the public realm. And it's an opportunity to use this money from government. But it's just about making sure we we get those bits of work done as well as the developments on the scheme. Thanks, Chair.
Absolutely, thank you. Councillor Mercer.
Thank you. We were contacted late last week by members of the Exchange Street Collective. I believe that this email has been circulated amongst everybody. What has been communicated to them recently, and will they be included in the Castlegate partnership?
They are members of the Castlegate partnership.
They're already.
Yeah, they are already members and they do attend the partnership. We have committed to give them a response by the end of this week.
Yeah, Councillor Auckland.
Can you give us some flavour of the mood music then at the most recent meetings? Is reassurance in the air? Are our partners feeling better?
The recent meetings we've had over the last couple of weeks, certainly, yeah, we've provided as much reassurance as we can. We haven't had the level of questions this time as we had last time, so I would suspect that hopefully that we've had that reassurance with the partners and discussion with the partners on that basis. There's a further partnership meeting proposed for January, and we'll get into some more detail with them then.
Is that okay?
I don't know, because we've got to take the reassurances that we have in a sense. So there's part of me then edging towards, well, do we need a recommendation? Say that ask officers to continue negotiations with partners, but it's what they're meant to do anyway. So I've said it.
I think ultimately that's part of the requirement of the funding, and that's something that is monitored and is ongoing. So there are proper checks and balances in there, and we've recently, I say recently, a couple of months ago now, put Councillor Vidler, who's the Members' Heritage Champion on the Castlegate Partnership. She's got a long-standing working relationship with those groups, has worked with them for many years before she became a councillor. So I know that we're making sure that there's regular contact there as well. So we've not just got the office contact, we've got the member contact through the appropriate route as well, which I think is important.
Yes, thanks, Chair. So sorry for coming back in. So there was one other point that was raised and discussed quite a lot 2 weeks ago, and that was about the informal soft communication with civil service colleagues in the Department for Levelling Up community. So have we had the feedback in terms of about what we could do in terms of I assume that was to do with S1 art space in terms of what we were trying to do there. Has there been positive soundings from them? Because that was what we were concerned about. We were concerned about pausing everything and causing causing the project problems, but equally we wanted to know that what the direction the council wanted to go down was something the department would be able to support.
We've had an initial conversation with them. I can't go into detail about that because it's in the appendix, but we've had an initial conversation with Department of Levelling Up Homes and Communities, and they have said that they will consider a formal change request if we were to submit it.
That's as positive as we're going to get, but I mean, I think that shows that the day's been a useful exercise in terms of getting more of us to understand where we're up to.
Okay, if we're all done, I will just ask, do we need to have a debate on the closed papers, or is everyone happy with those? Okay, then we just have the two recommendations on page 59 and page 60. Are members happy to agree those, please? Anyone not? Thank you, Tammy and Alan. Item 9 is the car permit-free development parking permit policy. And we have Kate and... Oh, we've got a whole show. Welcome. If you just want to go along and introduce yourselves and then present the paper, please, when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Tom Finnegan-Smith, I'm the Head of Strategic Transport, Sustainability and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Chair. Matt Reynolds, Transport Planning and Infrastructure Manager.
Kate Jockelin, the Transport Policy and Strategy Team. Okay. Just to introduce the report, the report recommends that committee approval of a policy that residents and developments that have been given planning permission on the basis of being car and or permit free will not be issued with residents' parking permits or business parking permits for businesses registered at those addresses. The report includes a recommended standard wording to be used on directives on future relevant permissions, and it's been brought to committee to confirm the existing process after legal advice was received that a policy committee approval provides backing to the existing operation of the process. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, Tom's going to complicate it now. Go on, Tom.
So I was just going to kind of confirm that this is really a belt and braces approach. So the decisions around the developments and the designation of car or permit-free status is through the planning process. This is really the braces, just to reflect that in terms of the operational activity we do at the moment from a parking policy perspective. So this decision doesn't influence the planning outcomes that have already been decided upon or in future. This is really the administrative backup to those decisions.
Thank you for that. I've got Councillor Gilligan, then Councillor Hurst, please.
Thanks for that. Thank you, Chair, and thanks. I have no problems with this paper at all. It's just something that crossed my mind. They are allowed visitor parking, which is fine. Is there any way they can use visitor parking for a permanent space for themselves?
Yeah, my understanding is that isn't a possibility. We'll take that back with colleagues in parking services in terms of the issuing of visitor permits, which are usually on a kind of either a book basis or a kind of an online basis. So we'll make sure that is backed up. But yes, now again, in certain locations, residents are there is shared parking, shared use parking, or pay and display parking and permit parking spaces in areas. So again, it's not that visitors can't come and park. There are limitations on the visitor permits and pay and display parking is available for people to do that. Again, if somebody were choosing to pay and display for their parking all the time, or at the hours in which charging applies and they want to park on street, then they could do that.
Councillor Hurst.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you say this is belt and braces, but I just want to know, this is from a planning perspective, does this have any impact or any repercussions for those schemes that have already gone through with a condition limiting parking? You know, a scheme that's been designed as being car-free and fits in with the overall master planning or the concept for living in an area. Does this have any repercussions or just it support that? I just want to know the relationship, I think, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. It supports, it enables us to go forward, but it also supports decisions that have been made previously by planning committee.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from Diane's point, because I'm seeing this very much from as a previous member of the planning board, so I'm well aware that we've got a number of schemes that we have agreed to be car-free, and very aware that the draft local plan that we are out for public consultation has many more developments that are going to be car-free. So can I just, so we talked a little bit about visitor car spaces. So just explain to me what the limits will be in terms of carers and blue badges, because the whole purpose of having something car-free is that there are not too many spaces. You know, it's as much about land use as it is about travel choice. So just kind of understand what we're saying in terms of blue badges and carers.
So in terms of carers permits, say somebody lives in an area and they require care to be provided, or they may have lived in an area for a while and then need care to be provided, then people can apply for those permits. It's the resident kind of permit that is the principal issue here, because that's, you know, in terms of that design, that's on a daily basis through, you know, 365 days a year position. Again, disable parking spaces. People are able to apply for disabled parking spaces, and they will be considered on their merits. And you know, they will be introduced where the kind of requirement is proven and can be provided.
Can I add to that, Chair? I think the terms and conditions on all the various permit parking areas are different from area to area. So that would be something that could be considered separately if changes were required to those in any particular area.
Councillor Perrett.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing the report. I mean, I just want to say it looks eminently sensible. I represent a ward which has seen a lot of planning applications which claim to be car free, and residents have a lot of concerns that there is no room to park cars. It is just going to overcrowd more and more and more. So it is nice to see some proactive action to mitigate that and help usher in that modal shift. It's a nice policy.
Yeah, agree totally with Minash. I'm really pleased to see this. It's great to see this being finalised in Kelham Island. It's generated a lot of questions that it's really good to have definitive answers now. Thank you very much.
Okay, members, we have two recommendations on page 74. Are we all happy to agree those, please? Yes? Anyone not? No? Thank you. We now move on to item 10, which is Local and Neighbourhood Transport Complementary Programme and Road Safety Fund Programme 22-23 delivery update. The hot seat. David, would you like to just introduce yourself and start when you're ready? Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you, Chair. My name is David Whitley. My job title is Transport Schemes Manager. I work within Strategic Transport and Infrastructure within the Transport Planning Service. I'll just do a quick briefing. I've got a few bullets with regards to this particular report, and then obviously more than happy to take questions at the end. So the purpose of the report is to provide an update on the Local Neighbourhood Transport Complementary Programme, which is obviously a bit of a mouthful. I think historically we've known it as the Local Transport Plan, but also we're picking up updates on the Road Safety Fund Programme too. We're looking at seeking approval to take variations within the programme through the Council's capital approval process, which obviously goes through the Strategy and Resources Committee. So in June this year, this committee approved the inclusion of around £5.8 million worth of local neighbourhood transport complementary programme schemes within 22-23, of which around 1.2 million was always expected to be carried forward for delivery in 23-24. So the report shows that carry forward figure has now increased to around 2.8 million, and some of the larger schemes that have been included in that increased value include the Abbeydale Wolsey Safety Scheme, delivery of 2 further safety schemes within the 22-23 road safety programme, a significant allocation for data collection and monitoring equipment on the highway, and contributions to our Transforming Cities Fund programme too. So section 1.10 highlights some of the reasons for the slower spend than originally expected. It's not to say that the money isn't committed or it won't be spent. It'll just be spent later than originally expected. So section 11 of the report sets out the main changes proposed within the Local Neighbourhood Transport Complementary Programme, all of which net back to no increase to the overall value. The main areas are a reduction of 219,000 in commitments in underwriting the Road Safety Fund 20-mile-an-hour programme. Now, this reduction doesn't mean that we're introducing a smaller number of 20-mile-an-hour schemes. Excuse me. So the main areas are a reduction of 290,000 in commitments to underwriting the Road Safety Fund 20-mile-an-hour programme. This reduction does not mean a smaller number of 20-mile-an-hour schemes will be implemented. This reduction is part offset by an increase in our spend on network management schemes, including an additional contribution to the Broadfield Road scheme, which is currently on site. Section 1.12 and Appendix A set out current progress and proposed changes within the Road Safety Fund programme too. So I just ask that you consider and approve the recommendations in the report, but in advance of that, obviously I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Anyone got any questions, please? Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I've a question about the Herries to Hillfoot cycle scheme. It says the Sustrand study is supposed to be done this month. Is that still on course? And when that's completed, when would that scheme come before this committee?
So yes, we're still on course to receive that feasibility study. We've not actually had the results of the feasibility study yet. So I would hope that we would obviously have time to understand the detail of what's included within that feasibility report, and then bring in a briefing to the committee in terms of what the next stage would be. So I would expect that to be early 2023.
Councillor Auckland.
Just a little correction in Appendix A, where on the 20-mile-an-hour zones you list Norton. It's not Norton, it's the Norton Lee scheme that's before us today. People will be maybe excited where I live in Norton that they might be getting a 20-mile-an-hour scheme, but they're not getting one just yet. My other question was on, my substantive question is, basically, thank you for bringing forward the report for delivering these schemes, which many local constituents value these sorts of interventions. And so, would it be possible for officers to bring forward proposals to manage through local schemes funded through our local community infrastructure levy? I wondered whether to raise it under the Works programme, and I hope people on the group will incorporate it into a possible item for future committee reports. But I think that's important, and there's money in there that could be spent delivering schemes. And I know it's a right chicken and egg situation. I assume, I've been told before, it's been discussed with LAC chairs, but somewhere, Chair, I think some of us need to get to a system where we can deliver some of these local schemes that could be funded through local SIL. Thanks, Chair.
Can I say that's an excellent suggestion, and if you'd like to give some SIL money to the North Lac, that would be lovely, because of course ours goes to the town and parishes, but yeah, my particular rant over Tom, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And
Don't say spend it, Chair, because we
do.
Yes.
So, in terms of the broad principle about whether local transport improvements can be funded from SIL, then yeah, absolutely. And we are more than happy to have those discussions with local area committees about the suggestions or priorities in their area. And we do have, and we will be having further discussions with the LAC in the new year about the way of working. So there are obviously capacity constraints. We have a core kind of team of people to deliver the programmes that are in front of you today, and some of the more strategic programmes as well. So that kind of horizon scanning, that kind of overview of what those priorities might be in LACs, we do need to work closely to understand that, and when decisions may be made on those projects. Again, it won't surprise you that the kind of need to develop those schemes to a level of confidence for yourselves and ourselves, clarity on costs, etc., will need to be planned out, and in its own right there are costs in taking things forward. So we intend to have more discussions with the LAC chairs in the new year to set out clearly what those protocols are, but yeah, definitely we're more than happy to have those discussions about how we can support the delivery of local transport improvements using local SIL. And in certain areas, I think David will probably ought to confirm, we have delivered, I think, a 20-mile-per-hour zone using local SIL as part of one of those local area committee priorities.
can I just say, Stocksbridge Town Council use a participatory budgeting scheme for allocating their SIL funding, which works extremely well. So that's something we could perhaps learn from. I've got Councillor Gilligan, then Councillor Hurst.
Yeah, I'll just make a comment about the using SIL monies, because we are trying to do that in Central, and I have had a discussion and I have been made aware that it is officer capacity that we do have to consider, because they have to still go to public consultation and things, so that takes time. But my main point, well, it was just a question really. It's Burton Street, not Burton Road. That's my little bugbear. But it said it has, on one page, on the previous page, it says it's going for approval in December. But I thought it says on the appendix that it's already been approved. So I just wondered, when is it going to happen?
Yeah, that's my error. I'll hold my hand up to that one. I'd also like to apologise for the fact that I've been a bit flustered during reading what I was saying there. I've been on a safari just before this event, and I've pedalled back in from Hillsborough because we've got through the agenda slightly quicker than expected. So apologies. I'm slightly more composed. Composed now. Yeah, it's an apology from my recollection. The traffic regulation order has been advertised. I'm fairly certain that the consultation period has actually finished. So we'll consequently be writing the report if there were objections. Now, what I would have to check is whether there are actually any objections, because if there weren't any objections, it wouldn't actually come back to committee. So am I okay to take that as a way as an action and just confirm that? Here we go, hot off the press.
Yeah. Hi, this is one of my schemes, and actually it's been issued to Amy for construction now because there weren't any objections. And just before I came to the meeting, I had an email from Amy to say they're going to start construction 4th of Jan. So quite quickly. Yeah.
So thank you, Susie. That's brilliant.
Yeah. So we're going to start very soon. Yeah.
I'll take it away as an action, and I can tick off my action. I will check. So and thank you to Councillor Auckland as well.
You can come again, Susie, if you've got good news.
Yeah.
Councillor Hurst and then Councillor Sengar, please.
Thank you. I think I've been inspired by Ian here because it's kind of it's a kind of a random remark. The question. I mean, we do have a range of options and activities and programs that are pulled together to achieve the outcomes and of the funding programs. And if we are moving forwards to look at different ways that we can achieve that and fund that, for me it would certainly help, and I don't know about other members if it would help them as well. I don't want to create work, but would it be possible, because I ask questions and the responses come back and they're reasoned and I understand them, but I don't understand the balance by why we do a particular piece of work in a particular area and what it wants to. It's like a pick list, you know, like a crossing would be good in this location, and you know this, and it's just really to help us understand when we look at scheme designs and we look at different funding options and different ways of achieving things going forward. It's just to help understanding, and I wondered if that would be possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hurst, and that's a really good question. And one thing which I alluded to in the last meeting with the 20-mile-an-hour zones, which I think Councillor Campbell-Pugh mentioned, we need to come back to the committee and spell all this out for you, I think. So in terms of setting our programme for next year, these are exactly the sort of things that we want to get into the details of. So why would provide a crossing here and not here, where the 20-mile-an-hour zones come from. We've got an agenda item later about our prioritisation of the part-time 20s outside schools. But I think it goes a little bit beyond there, and we can start to bring in the kind of the questions which Councillor Auckland was saying around localised prioritisation. Just to kind of paint the picture, there are various strategic projects which we have to do because we have to tick our statutory obligations, but there's also an element of flexibility beyond that. I'm working with Councillor Grocott a few years ago. We got the Road Safety Fund, which was kind of discretionary in that regard. We were able to pick certain things out, respond to particular demands which we knew were coming through the general administrative functions which we play as a council. But I think we need to refresh some of that. We need to bring it up to date to 2022, certainly reflect where we are as a committee. And I think that's something which we will be picking up as part of that budget setting process of our programme for next year.
That's coming in February.
Which will be February. We'll bring it back to this committee next time.
Councillor Sanger.
Yeah, well, obviously that's one of the many items that I want to see on the February committee. Might need two, because I do want to make some points about governance and money, but I'll just ask my questions first, and then I'll come on to the rant later. So in terms of the questions, really pleased to see the Abbey Lane scheme coming forward. Really pleased to see that you've been able to make a reduction because working with the mayoral authority. Do we have some sort of timescale on when that scheme will be delivered? And say it's really good that we're working in partnership with the mayoral authority. And the second one, in terms of Hanging Water Road, which obviously we've only taken 7 years to get to this point, very, very pleased that we've got feasibility scheme worked up. Clearly the next point is to report back on that feasibility and see which of those options are worth taking forward, so understand the timescale on that one as well. Say, really welcome both schemes. I'm really keen that they're both delivered within the next 18 months, but maybe that's optimistic.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Sangar. So I'll take the Abbey Lane scheme first. First of all, we've had a tremendous response on it. We've had several hundred responses, which is obviously excellent. We're having that level of engagement, but it's also brought us a lot more food for thought, for considering how we need to take that scheme forward. So the design team has got together, gone through a quick understanding of what the consultation response said. So we've got a meeting in with local councillors, hopefully towards the first part of next year, so certainly within January, and we'll report back where we think we are with that project. Ultimately, the Abbey Lane scheme, maybe I was being optimistic, but I wanted to get that on the ground by January. Clearly that's not going to happen, because we thought we'd done quite a lot of work to get us to a position of just going out and getting something in, but ultimately what's come back is a lot more user need, which is the whole purpose of the engagement exercise, which obviously I think it makes us deliver a better scheme. So if it takes a bit more longer, we get a better product at the end of it. We'll work through what that looks like in terms of design changes, but we've already done quite a lot of the timely stuff, like some of the engineering works we do around topographical surveys and stats inquiries and all that sort of stuff. That's all done, that holds us up, so we're in a good position. In terms of Hanging Water, the design team has got an idea for us, well, several ideas actually, and one thing which we need to do is go back to local ward members, explain what they are, and then we can communicate that to the public, because that's the next thing we need to do. Just going back to Abbey Lane, we have a consultation report done. We will be hosting that back on our Commonplace website, so those who commented can see how everyone else commented. The broad brush outline is that about 85% were supportive of what we're trying to do, which is excellent. And then the others, as I said, mentioned bits for improvement, which we need to take away into the next stage of design. So all in all, I think good. 18 months. Hope we should have something in place. I'm going to go out there and say we will have something in place.
Yeah, that's great, and clearly that's great, Chair. Clearly, Abbey Lane's been, we've been working on this for a number of years. I remember back in the community assembly days, it was one of those schemes where it was becoming obvious as the Woodland Discovery scheme and the work being done in Exeter Woods that the demand for crossing there was increasing. So it's really glad that we're going to get something there. Hanging Water. I'd watch this space, but really, really positive that we've got the money and the officers have done some work, and now we just, as I say, I think that's going to be a hard job. Just into the wider point, so where do I start? And I'm really addressing this to Matt Reynolds, Tom Nicholas-Smith and Will Stewart, because you weren't here, but if you look at the 20-mile-per-hour schemes, all of those were on the stocks, were being discussed by the community assemblies in the council year 12-13 as though I'm going to be delivered that year, or 13-14, 14-15. And I know there were cuts, government cuts and capacity issues, but these died. So similar schemes were on a programme list to be done in 2 or 3 years and died and have reappeared. Now, it's good that they've reappeared and it's great that they're happening. and it's, you know, but so that'll be the first point, that it's taken us a long time. We've been talking about 20 mile per hour schemes, and it's taken a long time. It's really great they're now happening, and it's really great that they've got dedicated resource and they've been coming at speed this year. So it's positive, but there has been a delay. The second point about the 20 mile per hour schemes is I don't believe that they are strategic. I think the decision to have 20 mile, it might be a strategic decision, but the detailed work should have been delegated to the LACs. I think this is, you know, we moved pre-amendments to the last couple of years to try to, we didn't win. We're going to keep on about it. We've clearly got a governance review. When we have schemes in the future that are not strategic, where the local ward members are the right people to be involved, and they should take the decisions. It shouldn't be here at TRC, and the TRC agenda is far too big on big strategic matters. So that's where I'm in terms of 20 mile per hour. In terms of the other things on this, this report is a reporting process, and we need to work out what the right place to report it. And it seems to me we still got a challenge about how we deal with capital schemes and, you know, the issue of SIL. It's really hard. Members have found it really hard to access local SIL through the LAC process or directly through the highways process. So it's still work in progress. And, you know, clearly we've got a budget process, and we'll see what we can do that. There remains a challenge, Chair, that if we have 1,400 requests that are in the transport system, how do we prioritise them? And that's been the challenge for this council for the last 15 to 20 years, as we've seen the number go from 600 to 1,400. And we need a process that involves the 84 members and not one cabinet member. We no longer have a cabinet, we now have a committee system. I'm not convinced this committee of 9 is as good as 84 members through the LACs. So we need a process that whittles down that list of 1,400 so that ideas that are 15 to 20 years old get got rid of. Because at the moment, things just stay on the database forever. As members, we can keep some of them alive. You know, I kept a double-year line scheme alive for 17 years until we got it delivered in the 18th year. But that would never been done because we're told we have to delete all our emails after 6 years, for example. So you have to be quite an obsessive to get some of these schemes through. And that's because of how small amount of money there is. So I accept the constraints in terms of capital, constraints of officer resource, but there's also a governance constraint. So I do think we need to think more clearly about how we do these things and how we're more reactive and how we can say to, when the public come in with petitions, how we can be realistic with them and say there's a process, we will analyse it and come back to you within 6 months, and then we'll make a decision within 2 years. And if it's a no, it's a no. But if the public in an area really wants something and there is a transport need, I think we should try to find a more reactive way of doing it. I think that is something that the LACs were set up to deal with, and I just think we need to find further ways of achieving that, and we have struggled this year. Really glad to see the schemes going forward. As I say, yeah, another scheme that I would support here, you know, as an example of being speedy and reactive, I would say you know, the Brookhouse Hill scheme that here is exact example of where we had an issue that got worse over COVID. Public put in a request, and we've been able to answer it. So we are responding better, but I just think we need a way of making all 84 councillors be able to influence the process, and I think that's what was voted for in the referendum. And I think we've struggled as a TRC committee to understand the processes, because some of these processes we've inherited from the cabinet system. I just think we need to be bolder in terms of how we delegate to the LACs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think you make a lot of very valid points. I think the consultation is open at the moment for members to feed into the governance committee, so I sincerely hope that you will feed that in. I think other members need to think about what they need to say about that as well. You're right, we knew that on the first try, you know, we're not going to get this right. This is a new system of working for all of us, so we've just got to take it stage at a time. I think we've been quite clear as a council that we are trying to move to local involvement and local community engagement. We're trying that very hard. I did try recently to pass a scheme to my local area committee, but my local area committee have passed it back to this committee. I can't understand for the life of me why. So I think there are some learning points for us all, but I think as long as we're all clear on the direction that we need to move in, then we just need to make sure that we've got a consensus on doing that. And I think that is it's right and proper that the governance committee spend some time looking at that and come with some sensible proposals at the end of their review. And I think equally, it will be important to get feedback from officers in terms of how this scheme is working for them, and also members of the public in terms of their experiences and their expectations now that we've moved to the new committee system. So now Councillor Sangar and I have had a rant. Would anyone else like one? Or can we move to the recommendations? Okay, we have 3 recommendations on page 84. Are we all happy to approve those, please, members? Yeah, anyone not? Okay, thank you very much. And just to say, David, you said you were a little bit late because you'd been on your bike. I'm skipping through the agenda because some of our members have got to get to the cycle forum. So we do have a theme going through here today. Item 11 is the Double Yellow Lines 22-23 programme. Is that with you? Oh, David, you're on the roll. Continue. Thank you.
I am, and I'm slightly less out of breath now, so hopefully I'll make a little bit more sense. Right. First of all, an apology. I think the report says that we covered 14 sites in terms of consultation for the traffic regulation order programme this year. It was actually 15. So these sites came from a scheme request list, as has been spoken about by Councillor Sanger earlier on, and have been prioritised for delivery in line with our current approval methodology. So the functions of the schemes include improving visibility for vehicles and pedestrians at junctions and removing parking that obstructs footways as well as traffic flows. So letters and notices were sent out and posted, and 2 sets of emails were sent out both to LACs and local councillors. So out of the 15 sites, we actually received objections from 3 of the sites through the traffic regulation order process. Just look at each site in a little bit more detail. So Southey Hill at Southey, we had 1 objection to the scheme and one in support of the scheme. The objection was linked to the effect of potential displaced parking in the area. The TRO proposed a length of about 87 metres, which is about 16 vehicles. In terms of Borchie Road, Tinsley, we had so this is on the section of Borchie Road near Tinsley Green. We had 7 objections for the scheme. The objections were linked to the effect of displaced parking in the area. We've then reassessed, the level of restrictions that we were proposing, and what we're now asking, what we're now recommending, is reducing the length of restrictions that we put in, which adds backing space for around 10 vehicles to park on the side roads off Borchie Road, and then finally. Hoyland Road in Neepsend, we had 9 objections to the scheme and two emails of support for the scheme. So the objections were linked to the effect of the loss of parking for visitors to businesses. This included one person who identified themselves as disabled. But there are also areas of unrestricted parking within 150 metres of the businesses, including on other sections of Hoyland Road itself. Just going back to the person who identified himself as disabled, if they had a blue badge, we're not proposing putting loading and waiting restrictions on the double yellows. So they could actually park if they were visiting that businesses for up to 3 hours. However, we still looked at whether we could reduce the length of the restrictions, and we felt that we could, particularly a little bit further along Hoyland Road. The road actually splays out, so it's a little bit wider. So again, we've reduced the amount of length of restrictions that we're proposing to put in, and put in again roundabout space for 10 vehicles. Again, I ask that you consider to approve the recommendations in the report as set out, but more than happy to take any questions in the meantime.
Thank you, David. Councillor Nursery.
Yeah, very much welcome any measures that are there to improve safety and access for pedestrians and people using the pavements. I'm just concerned that it's going to be diminishing returns with all of these schemes because we're frequently contacted by lots of people very frustrated that existing double yellow lines aren't enforced, and I'm aware that it's diminishing returns. More yellow line schemes mean that you've got a parking enforcement team spread out over more. What is there going to be additional resource for enforcement? Can we pass this over as a recommendation to Waste and Street Scene to increase the amount of enforcement officers?
So it's a very valid question. As part of the capital cost of the scheme, no, we can't pay for additional enforcement as part of the capital cost of the scheme. So in reality, we will be asking colleagues within parking services to focus on these areas, certainly in the first few weeks, and then a little bit more periodically. But your point about the fact that it's the same resource spread over slightly a greater level of restrictions is right. That said, we are, in terms of the bigger picture of enforcement, we are looking at other ways of enforcing restrictions through other capital projects that we do have. There'll be absolutely no harm in us then having a conversation with parking services in how best we could maybe redeploy those resources further down the line. But that is further down the line. Certainly 12 to 24 months. So I don't want to raise expectations. I don't want to raise expectations now. But your point is a very valid one.
Would that be part of this committee, or would that be part of Waste and Street Scene?
So when you're talking specifically about ANPR, so we're not going down the line of ANPR. Are you referring to cameras that could enforce the likes of red routes? Should we choose to go down the line of red routes? Yeah, I think that decision would come through to here as a policy committee. Exactly, I've got that right, haven't I? I'm just.
I think in terms of whether there's an additional investment required for operational parking services, that may well go to Waste and Street Scene. In terms of what we're able to enforce because we do have camera car that can drive along certain key corridors, take enforcement action, as David alluded to. It's only on certain types of restriction that we're able to do that. It's where the loading restrictions are in place and people shouldn't be stopping at all at those times. So we're able to do that with camera. We're able to do that outside schools where we've got all of our no stopping restrictions at school times. And that's the focus for that vehicle, and that's the enforcement action that is undertaken. Anything else would require us to look at that as part of a wider scheme, and that would generally come here if there were a scheme of restrictions that we're introducing and we could enforce that through camera. Then we would look to seek to include the capital cost of that equipment within the scheme that we're delivering. So the revenue cost and activity would be with parking, but the scheme itself would capture as much of that enforcement capability as possible.
In terms of the double yellows that we're proposing here, these couldn't be enforced either by a camera car or by a fixed camera. It would have to be enforcement officers out on the street. That's right. And apologies if I've misunderstood the question about where the decision on money came to which committee. Apologies if I understood.
Any more questions or comments? Okay, we have 5 recommendations on page 96. Are we happy to approve those, please? Anyone not? Lovely. Thank you. Item 12 is a part-time advisory, 20 mile an hour speed limit outside schools. Susie, hopefully with more good news. Thank you.
Hiya, I'm Susie Pryor, I'm a senior transport planner. So I'm here to talk about the report on the proposed part-time advisory 20 mile an hour speed limits outside schools. So the recommendations of the report are to approve the design and installation of a programme of part-time advisory 20 mile an hour speed limits outside schools, and that the part-time advisory 20-mile-an-hour speed limits will be introduced in order of top-scoring schools, as this is where they are most needed based on the collision statistics and lack of pedestrian facilities. I'd say the advisory part-time limits are aiming to improve road safety outside schools at starting and finishing times by, reducing the speed of traffic when there's a high number of child pedestrians in the area. There's proven, that the lower the speed, the less likely a collision is to occur, or the less severity of the accident. There are already a number of schools across the city where we already have part-time advisory limits, because we've been putting these in as part of the 20-mile-an-hour area scheme if there's a road that wasn't suitable to be included. So there are already a number of them in place, and this programme will run alongside all our other school-based activity, such as school streets and the education, that is carried out in schools. 7 schools will be chosen initially. Again, these have been prioritised using a system on the number of pupils, lack of pedestrian facilities, and the number of collisions. And the higher the score, the higher the priority.
Thank you, Susie. Councillor Nessaru?
Yeah. My question would be, why only part-time? Why only advisory? Why can't it be all the time? And why is it not?
Because generally it's the road that we'll be putting these in on, or where schools are situated, where the road that they're on is unsuitable for a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, because it could be that the current speeds are too high. It might be a 40-mile-an-hour road, and they're also not included in an area that's, that we've already got the programme of 20-mile-an-hour areas. These are the schools that aren't included in these residential areas that have been identified as suitable. And so because we know they wouldn't get the 20-mile-an-hour limit full-time, the aim of this programme is then to put in the part-time advisory limits. And I would say when they're in, they've got flashing signs, and most people don't know that they're advisory. So, it does really draw attention though, doesn't it, that it is a 20-mile-an-hour limit, it's school times. And so hopefully we're going to monitor them and, to see what the speeds are, and hope that they will be effective. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Right, we have a bit of a list. We have Councillor Sher, Councillor Auckland, Councillor Craig and Councillor Gilligan.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for the report. I was looking down the appendix, and there's quite a number of schools that have had, one or more casualties and things that have scored much lower than other schools that haven't. And looking at the formula, it's like footway width goes on the scale from 1 to 10, whereas child casualties you get 2 points. So the question is, where did this formula come from? Is it something we've had in-house? Does it come from some kind of external best practice? Is the weighting for each category justified? Because it does seem weird that schools, even if they've got bigger pavements, the fact that they're having more casualties, it's kind of, it seems self-evident that there needs some interventions there, regardless of footway width.
So it was done in-house, the priority order, but I think it's because we wanted, there aren't generally high numbers of collisions right outside schools, so I think we wanted to take in consideration other aspects, like if there isn't enough pavement or any crossing facilities in place currently. So I think this is why it was decided to be done in this order. Yeah.
So how do other core cities do it in terms of this kind of weighting, and are there any other formulas that they use?
Sorry, I couldn't hear what you said then.
So I'm just saying, so you say that the formula that we've used is an in-house one.
Yes.
How do other core cities do it? Is there a standard, or is it?
So, thanks, Councillor Shaw. I think my answer is that these are not set schemes that every place rolls out. There won't be one standard approach. There is no national guideline for when these schemes should be kind of how they should be scored in that way. So what we've come up with is a kind of a suggested approach that leads to kind of a prioritised focus based on the criteria that we've established. But every core city probably doesn't have a programme of these to be developed in the way that we have. This is one of those discretionary parts that Matt was alluding to earlier in terms of the road safety fund that we have. We're able to roll these out in what we feel are appropriate locations, but yeah, there's no kind of nationally applied Department for Transport criteria in terms of setting a programme for advisory at 20 mph speed limits.
Councillor Auckland, please.
Thank you, Chair. So when we set up the local area committees, all the services came along and told us what they could do for us and what we could do for them as well. Mainly what we could do for them with our money. But one of the things you promised us was a 20 mile an hour advisory limit, one for each local area committee, and it's referred to specifically in recommendation B rather than one in each local area committee. And I just wonder what process got you to change that approach, because it was very firmly part of the offer that the transport services made to the local committees. And I think for a citywide list, one of the conclusions I've come to is that it's the judgment of Solomon when it comes to Scheme 5 as against Scheme 25, because really you'd like to do them all if we could, because they all have a degree of merit. So deciding that as between one local area and another, I think is pretty hard work. Would you not agree? But my main question is, we were promised one each, and now you've gone back on that, and I think that's a bit much.
So I'll pick that up, Councillor Auckland. So in terms of the one which is set out in front of us, this is what we would go with in terms of the kind of the policy. What we have discretionary on is then bringing that down for each LAC area. So you'll see in the tab we've got a table for each LAC area. This is part of that budget setting process I talked about earlier. So it's not that we've forgotten about it. It's just if this is a process we're looking to establish as a policy, then the worst first principle is what we're proposing. Now, if we want to go down through setting the budgets for next year, and that's what we determine is appropriate, then that's by all means that's what we can look at. But what we're saying is that in terms of doing these 7, this is the priority list. Anything above that will be the bits which we can play around with. In terms of the scoring, yeah, we have to go somewhere, and probably we can argue between the team about what would get one score and what would get the other. But it was a process of just trying to get us somewhere. So we had something to present and some element of rationale as to why we would do one scheme over another.
So, but you could turn what you've just said on its head. You could look at a prioritisation scheme as part of next year's budget if you've got the flexibility to do that, and stick with the undertaking that you gave of 1 per local area committee. Would that not be possible and not cause you too much difficulty?
Yeah, I think it would, and this is all part of the discussion today, Councillor Auckland. So, having the exposure to that conversation is what we want from this agenda item.
I'd probably like to change recommendation B back to the original.
Hold that thought. Councillor Perrott, please.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the report. I think I'd actually completely disagree with Councillor Auckland. I think I'd be much more comfortable prioritising based on need rather than local area committee for the sake of it. But I think the point I wanted to make was, I think, similar to Councillor Mussero's. I'm assuming there is some research or data on that shows advisory schemes do actually have an impact on driver behaviour, and it'll be helpful to have a bit more detail on that and what we expect to see from them. In terms of, you mentioned these are some areas where we probably couldn't get a 20 mile an hour limit at the moment. Do you think having the advisory scheme could be a gateway towards that, of then bringing in a full-time non-advisory scheme in future, would it, I guess, lend weight to strengthening restrictions?
I would say the thing is we have a set council policy which sort of sets out where we will implement the area-wide residential 20-mile-an-hour areas, and these are the roads that don't fit in with that. So I say at the minute, possibly not. There'd have to be a part-time limit because it's the only way we could get a 20 outside these schools at the moment because of what the policy is for the residential limits. Yeah.
If I just add a little bit to that, and I think this is where, in terms of kind of some of these locations, some of the kind of safety concerns are around that activity. So, you know, the speed limit and the appropriateness of the speed limit can actually be led by that activity at school start and finish time. So, you know, this is where we've looked at some of these streets that might not be kind of fit with the wider policy, and how we think that, you know, speed limit during these times is more appropriate at that lower limit. There are always engineering solutions that you can kind of introduce to manage speeds, you know, lower than kind of current limits and bring those speeds down. That usually involves some form of engineering measures, and clearly the costs of that, and then the kind of direct outcomes and benefits arising from that would need to kind of be worked through in a programme sense to show that value for money. So the challenge with all of this, and you know, we do want to be as transparent as possible in terms of the way in which we're recommending to you, and that decisions are made on how we spend and prioritise the funding that is available to us. It's really important that we're clear on that. You know, in terms of setting next year's programme, you know, we will have those discussions in February about what we're recommending to be included. The different criteria and appraisal approach that we have for each of those sections of programmes, they are different based on the outcomes that we're trying to achieve within that. That's not to say there's not flexibility, but when we have so many requests, we are trying to set kind of appraisal and methodology around that appraisal to prioritise choice. And, you know, in terms of that kind of almost triangle of a pyramid of schemes that we've got in front of us, some are at the top, and then as you work down, scoring almost flattens out across a number of schemes. So when you get down to that choice, and there might be 10 schemes that all score the same, then it really doesn't matter from an outcomes perspective which of those schemes you choose first, because they're all even. So then there is more flexibility about, you know, how you prioritise within that kind of pyramid of priority. But some of these, and it's the same with our local safety scheme programme, we do try and define our criteria based on a worst first principle, because that's where we feel it will make the most difference. But when schemes all score, you know, 10 in that grid of priority, then it wouldn't really matter which of those you did first if they all scored 10. So we do want to be really clear on that the reason we're having to prioritise and set some criteria is because of the limited funding that we do have.
Thank you, Tom. I think we do all understand and appreciate that, and so it's ultimately we've just got to make the tough decision. I think coming back to the point in terms of could it lead to a full-time 20-mile-an-hour scheme, just taking Bradfield Secondary School, it's not in my ward, but I know the school well. It's on a rural road that is the national speed limit. So, you know, if you put a 20-mile permanent speed limit on there, no one would ever do it because it's a long, straight rural road you can see for miles. So by having something that is temporary around school time is clearly important in terms of slowing the traffic down for when students are about. But I wouldn't ever see that becoming a 20-mile-an-hour road just because of where it is. And I don't know the locations of all of the schools on there, but in my mind, I'm imagining that that's pretty much sort of the sort of thing where they are, if that's of any help. The list continues to grow. Councillor Gilligan, then Councillor Sangar, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is just confirmation, really. So you've got 46 schools on here. Is that all the schools in Sheffield? That's my first question. No.
No, it's not. We started off with a list of all the schools in Sheffield, and then we took out all the ones that are already in a 20-mile-an-hour area, and they've already got a 20-mile-an-hour limit, and the ones that are due to be in one in the next few years. Okay. Then also, if a school had a school street already, they were taken out as well, or about to have a school street. That doesn't stop a school with a part-time limit from getting a school street. To just make that clear, but it's...
Okay. And if we have finances, is it the aspiration to do everything on this list?
Yes, it would be. Yeah.
Okay, so one of the schools in my patch is none here then. Hillsborough Primary, is that, we can't do that one?
I'm not 100%, but do they not already have one?
They don't have a 20-mile-an-hour.
Part-time 20 outside Hillsborough Primary, because there's...
Do they? I don't know. I didn't think they
I
did.
have to check.
Okay.
Yeah, because I already bought it, because is it where Parkside Road is?
Yeah. I don't think there's any limit on that.
When they were done a 20-mile-an-hour area there, I thought we might have done a part-time 20 there already, because it couldn't be...
Yeah, I can see
20,
it can't
but
be.
I'm not 100% correct on that. I'd have to check.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
No, but I like the programme. I think it's a good idea, and I hope we can do all the schools in Sheffield. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, during my 2 years when I was Cabinet Member for Children's Services, I did know the planned safer route for each of the 181 schools, and obviously since some of the schools were closed since then, and we've opened some others, but there's that order of magnitude. So when you see a list of 45, you always think, where's the other 140? So, you know, as we've heard, it's to do with what's already on 20 mile per hour schemes, and that's helpful. I mean, I think the other thing that would have been helpful is just to explain which are others on the other various schemes, because the Safer School scheme, look at Councillor Perec, because it seems to me that the Westway scheme has been a success, but equally I see Dobcroft is back on this list, and Dobcroft we were hoping to have a scheme, a Safer School scheme, and that hasn't worked because there's not enough school and parent buy-in. So it's understanding what works in what places and understanding the whole picture. And I feel we're getting a very partial picture. It feels to me that this is a tool that we've got where the speed is currently 30 or higher, and we've got no other way of getting it down, and therefore this is a low-cost way of getting it down in a temporary way. And I think we end up therefore with another scoring system that is frankly not very reliable. You know, I sat on an admissions committee for 7 years, and at the whole of that time, Bradfield Secondary was a special case for all sorts of reasons, as the chair has just outlined. There are no safe walking route to Bradfield Secondary, therefore we have to, you know, pay more transport costs to get the students to Bradfield Secondary, and here we are. It's scored highest. You know, that's reasonable, but I don't accept this scoring mechanism as the best way to ensure that all 180 plus schools in Sheffield have the safest route and make sure that there's the fewest chance of any collision between a motor vehicle and a school child. And I don't think that's the report we've got in front of us. I think that's the report I would have wanted to see. I think that's my problem, which I think is Councillor Auckland's point in a different way. Thanks, Jim.
So, would you like the additional information at some point in time? Would officers be able to provide that? Because I think it would be useful to. Then we've got the full picture. We can see what we've done. It's a good measure of where we've already had some success as well. So I think that would be helpful. I think in terms of the scoring mechanism, we need some sort of process in place because we've got difficult decisions to make. Ideally, as you know, we're all agreed we would like to do them all, but we can't. So we need some process in place. So if it's not the one that officers are currently using, then are we suggesting an alternative that we would rather have? I think that's then the other point that we just need to be clear on. I think, Tom, did you want to comment, please?
I was just going to confirm, Chair, that we're more than happy to bring further information to the committee or outside of the committee in terms of other activity that is going on in schools across the city. And obviously if it's part of our capital programme, that will come forward in terms of the setting of the capital programme in February. That we're also committing to do some work around a road safety plan for the city. Clearly a number of the issues that kind of transport and schools touch on are absolutely around road safety and some of the statistics that I'm sure the committee are aware of in terms of child casualties. So absolutely that will be a fundamental part of that plan as well, and we want to work closely with the committee in terms of making sure that we're covering off what we feel is needed for Sheffield moving forward. So absolutely happy to bring back further information about what we're doing at different schools at the moment, and that will be a central part of that plan moving forward.
Can I just add, Chair, into that? As part of the action plan, which Tom just talked about, we've engaged students from the University of Sheffield, as well as a well-known traffic management company called The Flow, which again, it's a university incubator which rely on data, all this sort of data. So we're using that to inform what the action plan looks like. This sounds like it's one of the things which actually be really useful to use. One thing I am conscious of with all this is paralysing this process by going into the nth degree of analysing every single bit of data, when in reality, we know these things work. If we've got something which is robust enough to get some stuff on the ground, then we should be looking at doing that. But I think as part of that process, obviously bringing TRC back into that discussion is critical. So.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Messerer, Councillor Hurst, then Councillor Auckland. Thank you.
Yeah, I really understand how you set up this programme and the decisions that you've made, and thank you for doing this. I'm wondering if we could look at changing the whole of the council policy, because it seems incredible that we have 40 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour outside a school, or in fact in any residential street in Sheffield, bearing in mind the horrific collision rates and stats that we do have in Sheffield. So can we change the council's policy so that it could be considered in future that schools are on streets which are in 30-40 mile an hour zones?
I think that's certainly something that we can capture as part of that discussion with the committee on the road safety plan, in terms of clearly what we want to do is there will be an evidence-based part of that, and there will be a reflection in terms of what the council commitments currently are. And that process is not just to kind of reiterate what we're doing, it's to pause, reflect, and kind of understand whether our actions are in line with the outcomes that we all want to achieve, which is safer roads in the city, and that those casualty statistics being addressed. The South Yorkshire Safer Roads Partnership, of which the City Council is part of, and a committed partner within, have ascribed to the Vision Zero principle, which is that it's not acceptable to have any road death on South Yorkshire streets. And absolutely as part of that pause, reflect, are we aligning our actions and decisions on what we do to that outcome? So as part of the road safety plan, yes, absolutely, there is an opportunity for the committee to expose what we do now and test ourselves about whether there needs to be change.
Thank you.
Councillor Hurst.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, really, my question was going to speak directly to what you just said, Tom, because I was looking through and I was going to ask about the scoring system and how you prioritise. I can get it, because school means more pupils, mean more risk. Titchy little, narrow little footway means that, there's a great chance of children spilling over and going onto the road. But I was looking through and the casualties, which is what the aim is all about, preventing injury or loss of life to a pupil or a pedestrian or user of a school, don't seem to score highly. And I just wondered if there was some formula or some rationale that we could look at, and it looks like Tom's already answered it, but it's just, looking down, we've got Ballyfield in there, which is the 3 schools that just popped out in Ballyfield, Lowfield and Intake, all of whom have had casualties, but all of whom are kind of like stuck in mid-table, if you know what I mean. And so I think I've changed from a comment into a question. Thank you, Tom. From a question into a comment, so thank you. But I you know, I recognise the rationale and I thank you for it. And it's clear, and we you know, even novices can understand that there is a rationale there. But if we are looking at preventing injury, preventing loss of life, then is there a way of building more weight into if someone has been injured or someone has lost their life, then obviously that, you know, is a great concern. Thank you.
The answer is yes, Chair. We can do that, and if the committee does wish to kind of take a position where you ask us to kind of check in terms of some of the weighting, as was mentioned earlier, in terms of towards, you know, the casualty statistics, then that's absolutely something that we can do, and more than happy to kind of do that work and present some, a variant on this prioritisation to you, if that's where the committee feel it's best sits.
Just to come back in quickly, Chair, I didn't mean to say go away and take it away and redo it all. It was just that going forwards, I mean, I understand that there are issues with the schools that have all been on this programme, because they wouldn't be on this programme if we didn't have concerns about them. And I don't want to hold the programme up, and I certainly don't want us to lose any money. But it's just about working something out going forwards, I think.
Thanks, Councillor. It's a quick job to change the weightings and things. We can certainly do some sensitivity testing, etc. That's not a problem.
Firstly, completely parochial, but I'm reminded about this. Norton Free's not on the list. It could be confused with the Norton 20-mile-an-hour zone, because as far as I know, Norton Free is not in the 20-mile-an-hour zone and has been proposed for a school street, but has not made the cut so far. So if the officer just wants to check that. It's just to look at the point was made about accident reduction and danger reduction. I do actually think there is a strong argument to be made for focusing all our road safety spending on reducing accidents, particularly child accidents. The problem I have with that is that when constituents come to us as individual councillors and come up with a line of, are you saying somebody has to be killed or seriously injured before you do something about this obvious danger that's clearly there, is that the only honest answer to that question is to say, yes, somebody does have to be. So we've got to have a mixture, in my opinion, of both accident reduction and danger reduction. I'm sometimes worried, in any case, that when we use accidents as a proxy measure for schemes that we'd all like to deliver in our wards, when we use accidents, the relationship between the scheme that's proposed, so a 20-mile-an-hour thing, advisory outside schools, and the actual accident that occurred, there's no causality there. So we're not actually dealing with the cause of the accident, which might be related to road education, lighting, driver error. 3 o'clock in the morning, somebody doesn't give a damn. And I don't know whether, when we've looked at the accident statistics, we've actually looked at whether the proposal that we're making, 20-mile-an-hour advisory outside school, would have actually have been a helpful factor in preventing that very, very regrettable accident. And as I say, that's my dilemma. That's why I've come back and said, well, it's perfectly reasonable to argue that these are partly confidence building measures and driver education measures and things that people who use the school and children particularly would like to see, parents, and encouraging people to walk to school. And we can all make a case for that. So that's the reasoning, Chair, behind me saying, wow, you promised this, and come up with a prioritisation scheme. The only thing, you know, I've looked now a bit more closely at the table. I can see there is one standout case there at the top of the list on the scoring system. But again, the causality between the occurrence of the regrettable road traffic collisions and accidents and the proposal before us, I don't see it. Is it there?
Thank you, Councillor Oakland. That is a really good point, and that is something specifically that we've asked the University of Sheffield to look into as part of this data case. So, within the accident reports, which happen when there's a reported injury accident, there is a causation code. Of that causation code is registered to a whole manner of things which could have happened. What we're doing in terms of the accidents specifically around the school is looking at the ones which are relevant to that and time of day and all that other sort of information, which would then go to determining what the impact of road safety around the schools. No, it's not in this report. This is done on more global, unsifted accident statistics. Now, yeah, and yeah, yeah, but that's fine. Yeah, I mean, we don't have any problem with that. This is the whole purpose of this meeting, as I said before, and we can go back and do another data trawl and come back with another list. I think that, you know, the principle is that we want to do this sort of thing, and I don't think that's not coming out from this meeting. It's just how we get there is something which we need to do a bit more work on, and we'll take that away.
Thank you. Councillor Parrick.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a quick follow-up question about, I guess, future cycles of this. Could we have if we were to do, I think we're all happy to do 7, recognising the limits on funds. If we are to do 7, is there potential to do future rounds in future, and could we possibly get, subject to officer capacity, maybe costings which we could then share with LAC? So if LAC wanted to try and fund their own scheme, they have an estimate of how much that might cost as well.
So absolutely, as part of we can provide like an average cost for what we're proposing here. Obviously, it goes up and down depending on kind of site constraints and other issues, but we can provide that absolutely. And obviously, kind of LATs can see, as we've highlighted here, where schools in their area may sit within this. It's just reinforced that the criteria that we've established so far is primarily risk reduction in terms of this. So, you know, it is that where those footways are narrower, where speeds are higher, where crossing facilities are more limited, that is where the scoring has been focused. The casualties are absolutely part of this, but it is mainly focused at the moment in terms of risk reduction, and that's the principle around this one. But if you want us to look at this again, then it can be, we can take away and look at the weighting of the criteria that have been used.
Okay, members, so we do have 2 recommendations on the page. Do you want me to put those to you, or would you rather we asked officers to go away and have another look? Okay, you want to put the recommendation. So we've got the 2 recommendations as they are. So all those who are in favour of the 2 recommendations. So that's it. Those who aren't. So that's a no to the recommendation. So does someone want to make me a new recommendation, please?
Well, I mean, I think what I was moving towards was to bring a paper back quite quickly, in February or so, that we understood all the accident reduction and danger reduction schemes in schools, and understood the way this project fitted alongside others, and we then could see with this scoring mechanism whether the way forward was to take the top 7 or the top 5 or the top 10, or whether, as we agreed last year, whether it should be 1 per lakh or 2 per lakh, having regard to the other road safety schemes going on, because there's 181 schools, there's 45 on this list. We need to understand whether all the others have been covered. I mean, there's a lot of work that the transport officers have done outside of this report, and that's why we didn't. You know, the reason I didn't agree with this recommendation wasn't because of the narrow bit of this. It was because we don't understand the context, and we were, you know, last year we agreed it would be 1 per lakh, and we'd rather it would be 1 per lakh, even if my Stannington colleagues are the ones who miss out most on this, and I get that. So it is about trying to find something that is judgment of Solomon and fair, and we understand the process where, as other colleagues have said, we can understand over funding over a number of years, we could get all 45 of these done. So it's about agreeing something which we can see over a number of years. All schools will have a programme, whether that's school streets or whether it's this 20 mile per hour or whether it's changing the road speed completely. And it's seeing that range of measures, but not delaying too far. And so I think that's where I would rather be.
Okay, Councillor Hurst.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't necessarily want to salami slice so that we say absolutely every lakh has to get a scheme, whether or not there hasn't been a nice big wide footpaths and there hasn't been an accident there for the last, I don't know, since the Education Act or whatever. It's just unpicking that tension between the location and the casualty, and looking to see whether, looking at the work the university is doing to see if there's any learning to come out of that, and where the casualty was caused by the location, then obviously that has to be given more weight, I think. Am I getting too complicated? I think I am.
Chair, I don't think there's anything really complicated in what you're saying. I think that could be a decent way forward to unpick it. I guess there's a part of me that looked at the start. Well, we were promised, because I'm keen on local committees, I'm thinking we said we were going to get one, and I still would like to see that. And I thought there was a hint in what the officers said that we might actually end up with both, because of when they look at what they think they can do next year. But to change on what was promised, I'd need a lot more. I'd need the sort of information that you've got and the causal link. I don't think I'd sit here and think, well, that's an obvious case, but I should just ignore it to get an extra one somewhere in the South Local Area Committee. In truth, we have got, in my ward, we've now got Derbyshire Lane, if we approve a later report, Woodseats prime rate, because that's included in the 20 mile an hour in Woodseats. Abbey Lane is not too far down the list, if it might change when you look at it again. Norton Free's on a separate road, really. So it's not so much I'm thinking about Rose Park Ward necessarily.
Can I?
So if we just leave it like this, Chair, does that leave them to?
I've got two more members who do wish to speak, but in terms of just trying to get to the bottom of all this now, because I think we've given it a really good airing, rather than trying to put a set recommendation, are we looking at requesting officers take this paper away, bring back something that includes all of the schools in Sheffield and what schemes they are or aren't on, so we can see where the gaps are, that they then look at the scoring mechanism that should be used, which is most appropriate, taking into account the work that is being done with the universities and other and how that should be, so that we can then make a decision whether the most appropriate thing to do moving forward is to go with the scoring scheme or go with the one scheme per like alternative. Have I missed anything out in terms of that being the broad picture? And has any member got anything desperately to add that hasn't been said before, if that is the way forward?
I am very much in favour of doing it by priority. I think that's clear. I don't really think it matters whether we do one in each lap or not. I'd rather keep kids safe. And for that end, I would like us to do Part B and approve the schools that we've already listed. I don't want to put it back and keep delaying it. And if we're going to do more schools, then can we have a new way of doing it? That would be my suggestion.
We've just voted that down. No, we just voted that down. Only the two of you voted in favour of... Oh. I think no delay is good, and hopefully we'll get this back pretty quickly. Councillor Parag.
I think just in giving a helpful steer to officers, I do feel like there is a tension between the two recommendations we're giving of either prioritising based on need and factoring in a bit more contextual information versus prioritising based on lacks. I mean, just if you look at the list, one LAC's highest ranked school is 46 out of 46 for Central, because contextual information about the LAC area is that the majority of schools in that LAC area will probably be covered from other schemes. I think it does make sense to have more contextual information about need and priority. I think I would probably ask the committee to consider giving recommendation that LACs for LAC's sake rather than need is probably not the most helpful recommendation, particularly when we would then be prioritising literally the 46th scheme just because it's the only one in Central for the sake of it. I think if that's helpful, I think I would ask us to give that steer.
I would like to think that if we get more information on where we have schemes and what schemes we have already, and then we have the more detail in terms of why the schools are prioritised, that probably that would be the natural conclusion that we would come to as a committee, as opposed to saying, well, actually, let's just give one to every like. But time will tell, and are we all happy that, as happy as we can be, given that the two recommendations have fallen, that's the work that officers go away and do? Have you got a clear enough steer, please, in terms of what the committee is after?
Yes, Chair, yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay, that was item 12. Item 13 is Highfields 28 mile an hour TRO objections.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this is one of 5 reports for 20 mile an hour zone objection reports. The committee will be well versed on the process here. For the Highfield 20 mile an hour, we received 18 responses, of which there were 4 formal objections. The objections went through the normal grounds as what we would expect. Things like the scheme not needed, not enforceable without cameras, and that kind of a response. What I would just point out to members that this is part of the Sheaf Valley cycle route. It was a response which we took from consultation. So a lot of community said they wanted to control speeds in the area, suggested a 20 mile an hour zone. This is what we propose on the back of that. So the recommendation here is for approval. Any other questions, let me know.
Thank you. Any questions or comments, members? We have got 3 recommendations on page 146. Are we all happy to accept those, please? Anybody not happy? Excellent. That was easier than the last one. Item 14 is the Dealings 20-mile-an-hour TRO objections. Matt, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, so just like the last one, this received slightly more responses, but the same level of objection. So we had 40 responses to the TRO advertisement, of which there were 4 objections. Again, it was along the similar lines of not enforceable, don't support it, waste of money, that sort of a thing. The exception to this one, though, is we have had a response from Sustrans, and they've identified a specific road on Dealings Avenue. Dealings Avenue wasn't suitable for a 20-mile-an-hour. It's a bus route, it's a wider road, it carries a lot more traffic, it's actually designated as a C road. But as part of that, we're actually talking to Sustrans to try to work out whether there's any localised improvement we can do to kind of get over the particular issue which they've identified there. In addition, Collie Road is also of a similar position. I think it does lend itself to being more of a 20-mile-an-hour environment. The speeds aren't reflective, so we're going back to our design team to see what we can do around bringing some of those speeds down. But the recommendation is, as suggested in the report, with the map and the recommendations.
Any comments or questions, members? Are we all happy with the 2 recommendations on page 160? Yeah. Anyone not? Thank you. Batemore 20-mile-an-hour TRO, Matt.
Thank you very much, Chair. So this one is for the Batemore area. We have received 27 responses, of which there was 3 objections. You've just heard the reasons for it, the reasons of the objections previously. It's the same one for this scheme. The bits which we just want to emphasise within here is that we've identified a part-time advisory outside Meadowhead Secondary School. That is not included within this scheme because we're picking up as part of one of the crossings, which is also going on Dyche Lane. So although it's not been picked up within this project, it's been identified as something to do. We're delivering it through the Dyche Lane crossing as that's already or just about to go on site. So we'll pick it up through that work.
Thank you, Matt. Anything, members? Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. I certainly welcome this scheme. I mean, 11% objection rate is quite good. I think that's quite good compared to a lot of other schemes. I'm sure this will be welcomed by residents and the local TARA and other people in the area. Matt just answered my question about the part-time advisory outside Meadowhead, because I know there's been several collisions there over the last year that's caused concern for parents and other people in the area. So could you just confirm when the advisory scheme and the crossing is due to? I presume the TRO will have to come to this committee and when the crossing might be completed.
Yeah. So this is the TRO report for the 20-mile-an-hour zone for the wider area. So that will obviously depend on how you want to vote it in a couple of minutes' time. There won't be the advisory 20-mile-an-hours don't require a traffic order. They're advisory, so that's why we can get them in relatively quickly. And the crossing works at Dyche Lane, which is the Colaston side of Dyche Lane, Councillor Shaw, if that's where you're wondering. Again, I don't think that scheme requires a TRO. It doesn't require any waiting restrictions. Now, there is an option to put waiting restrictions in, but we can get that crossing work done and go back for the TRO later. I would just say is that we've been talking to Meadowhead School quite a lot recently, and this is this has come from one of the suggestions which we've had through that dialogue. So it certainly is responding back to the needs of the school. But in terms of timescales, we've gone through the capital approval process for the Dyche Lane crossing, so it's all about scheduling for construction.
And the crossing outside the school.
So the crossing outside the school is part of this year's programme, of which feasibility design is currently nearly completed. So that will be for programme for construction next financial year.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have 3 recommendations on page 174. Are we all happy with those, please, members? Anyone not? Excellent. Thank you. Item 16 is the Waterthorpe 20 mile an hour TRO objections map.
Thank you, Chair. So, Waterthorpe received 70 responses, of which there was 10 objections. Part of Oakerdike has not been included. I just want to bring that to the attention of the committee. This is the section from Moss Way going west, going east towards the turn off for Crystal Peaks bus interchange. That is not deemed to be appropriate due to the speed surveys, but the rest of the road will be in. Again, most objections was around the waste of money not needed, too heavy-handed, etc. But we feel the benefits of the 20 mile an hour scheme outweigh those objections, so recommending for approval.
Thank you. Any comments or questions, or can we accept the 3 recommendations on page 190? Yeah? Anyone not happy? Excellent. Lucky last, Matt, Norton Lees, 20 mile an hour.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and I will just confirm it is Norton Lees and not Norton, as Councillor Auckland helpfully suggested earlier. Norton Lees. Yeah, no, I was, yeah, Chair, you were fine. I was just making sure. So we had 62 responses, of which there were 4 objections. With this scheme, we actually got quite a lot of useful feedback from the residents. So they picked up various other issues which they thought we should be addressing at the same time, of which that is now within our scope for further works. One of which being a crossing of Derbyshire Lane, which is included within our programme for next year, which is obviously helpful to realise that we are getting consistent messages back from the community as in relation to our programmes. The objections again, I'm just going to repeat it, but it's all around kind of unenforceability, waste of money, better spent elsewhere, etc. But one thing which we are looking to do as part of this project, we've identified Derbyshire Lane is not appropriate for the reasons which we explained before for a 20, but outside Mundella School we'll be putting in a part-time 20. We feel Mundella obviously fronts Derbyshire Lane. It's traffic calmed already to some extent on there, but we still want to reinforce the fact to drivers that there is a school there, and the part-time 20 mile an hour will go to just reinforcing that message. So we're proposing to put that in as part of this project.
Thank you, Matt. Ian?
Yeah. Can you just check on 326? Is that still in play, the actual scheme by the park for a crossing on Derbyshire Lane?
Yes, that will be going. That's in our feasibility design for next year, I think. Is it?
Yeah, it's, excuse me. It's feasibility is showing that it's. I'll be honest. Feasibility is showing that it's looking difficult in terms of fitting the crossing in. But we do feel that there will be a scheme in that location. If you're talking near Cobner Road, is that right?
Yes. So the reason why I ask is exactly the point that's just been made. Some inquiries have been made, and the latest information informally given was that it was looking like it wouldn't make the cut. But there is a local SIL scheme to do some lines there, which I've been harping on about for a while. So. Just wanted to clarify that, Chair. Thank you for the answer. Thank you to the officer and the officers who brought this forward today, because it was looking like it was going to be a lot of hard work to get it on the agenda and fit everything in. So I'm really grateful it has come forward, because the truth is 62 responses, 4 objections. I think one of those objections was certainly somebody who thought that all of the roads should be included, so not the ones that on policy grounds we exclude because the speed's too high. And I know there is a body of opinion that feels that every road should be included. Personally, I think enforcement of 30 mile an hour limits on some of the roads is important. But it's good to see this scheme progressing, obviously from Ward Councillor's point of view, but it's also good to see that there's been a lot of engagement and I think a high number of comments compared to all the other schemes. So that's, I think, something to be pleased about. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we have 4 recommendations on page 208. Are we all happy to accept those, please? Anyone not? Lovely. That brings us to the end of the agenda for today. So thank you everyone for attending and for your contributions, and good afternoon.
Did you want your discussion?